arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know.
Welcome to the Bassline. James Roguski is a thoughtful, practical, and dedicated man. He is a treasure to the medical freedom movement, and he is also at the forefront of a very important campaign to have the PrEP Act repealed. It is with gratitude that I welcome back to the Bassline the persistent James Roguski. How are you today, James?
I'm doing great, Jeremiah. We've had a couple of good conversations. I'm looking forward to another one.
Absolutely. So, first of all, just a quick check-in with the audience here. I'm actually going to be performing in St. Croix this weekend, which I'm really excited about. So I'll be on an airplane headed down there this Friday. So this is a pre-recorded episode. And I figured that James would actually be a perfect guest for the fact that, first of all, I owe him an article. I owe the world an article called James Roguski is Right. It's time to repeal the PrEP Act. And yeah, it took me a minute to get around to it because I'm just always flying by the seat of my pants. But I figured by the time the article is published, the timing will be right and the campaign will be picking up. And I'm actually going to be headed out to France the following weekend to finally be reunited with my family, my wife and my two kids. They've been in France just being, immersed in the French culture and language, especially for my two kids who are in a French program in school. And I had chess camp to teach here and I had gigs to do, but I'll finally be reunited with the family. And that travel time will give me an opportunity to focus in on this article that I owe James and that I owe the world, because James is at the forefront, as I mentioned, of a really important campaign to repeal this act that seems entirely detrimental. I mean, I'm going to do my research on this trip. I'm going to produce this article. I figured today would be a great day to sort of get a private consultation with the professor himself to help me prep for this big project, this term paper, if you will. And I would love for you to just get us warmed up here, James, by just giving us a summary in terms of the history of the PrEP Act.
Absolutely. The PrEP Act is pushing 20 years old. It was formally signed into law on, I believe, December 30th of 2005, and by George W. Bush. If you rewind on the chronological order of your mind all the way back to 9/11, and then, the nation was in shock and in fear. And then there were these anthrax attacks, and fast forward to the Iraqi war and Colin Powell, before the United Nations, holding up a vial of some, supposed biological weapon or whatever, weapons of mass destruction and so forth. Then 2005 came along and Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and the Bush administration did a lousy job of dealing with that. A week before Christmas, there was a conference committee between the Senate and the House to iron out the differences between a House bill and a Senate bill for military appropriations and Katrina relief. And they stayed up late into the night a week before Christmas and went to sleep thinking they had an agreement to iron out all the differences between the two bills. They woke up in the morning to find this turd in the punch bowl, that there was 14 pages added onto the legislation called the PrEP Act. And many Democrats, many prominent Democrats, stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, you're not following proper procedures. This was not agreed upon. We thought we had an agreement. Where did this come from? And they quickly got a constitutional scholar to write up a paper that was entered into the Senate record saying, how many different ways this violated the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Representative John Conyers, the late representative from Michigan, and the late Senator Ted Edward Kennedy spoke up and gave a very impassioned speech about how this was just wrong on every level imaginable. Interestingly enough, at the time, Senator Joe Biden and Senator Hillary Clinton did the same thing. They are on the record as saying, this is horrible and doesn't belong, it's unconstitutional. And then they proceeded to vote for the bill, because how could you deny relief to Katrina victims? And this is how legislation is made in the United States. About a month and a half after that, in February of 2005, Senator Edward Ted Kennedy, submitted legislation to repeal the PrEP Act. And he did again with a slightly different version in September of 2006. But the Republicans were in charge, and those bills didn't manage to repeal the PrEP Act. And especially in his September version, it became very clear how what the original intent was and how it had been adulterated. So Kennedy was apparently working on a bipartisan effort to put forth some kind of legislation like this, but it got hijacked and replaced with what we now call the PrEP Act. And if you read his proposed repeal act and replace it with what he thought was appropriate, it's very clear that what it was originally intended for was, if the government was going to send the military into harm's way, where there might be some kind of biological warfare, and maybe send medical personnel, along into the fray, they wanted to ensure that they could have industry quickly manufacture some kind of antidote or vaccine or treatment or whatever. And the best way I can explain this is the government wanted to behave like an insurance company, saying, look, we're going to send you off to war. We're going to try to prepare you with a vaccine or something that we hope will be helpful. You don't have to take it if you don't want it, but here it is if you do. And if those products cause you any harm, we, the government, are not going to allow you to sue the companies. We're going to have a compensation program that will take care of any health issues and the costs and losses that you may suffer, while we're sending you off to do these things that we want you to do in the military or medical support personnel. And the problem with that is they didn't fund the countermeasures injury compensation program, and they just really don't accept any claims. If you've ever dealt with an insurance company, you realize how the game is played. Oh, give us your money on a monthly basis, pay into this thing. But when you go to make a claim, suddenly your property or your car is devalued and you get pennies on the dollar, and you always feel screwed by the insurance company that, they just don't give you the claim that you feel you deserve. But the law says you can't sue the company that manufactured the product that you were coerced into taking. It was never intended to be for the whole world. And so, the money to pay out claims for the harms that have been caused, not just by vaccines, but by literally anything that any hospital may have done during COVID and other issues. The way they set this up is they gave authority to the Secretary of Health and Human Services to declare that there might be a problem. Maybe today, maybe in the future, could be some disease that's off in the distance. We don't know. No studies, no data, no clinical trials, no FDA approved drugs, no emergency use authorized anything. Just because he says so, there's a list of what they call covered countermeasures. Realize we're really talking about biological warfare here. And those are drugs and devices and injections and whatever the heck it is he says. And any person who administers those, any doctor, hospital, clinic, nurse, pharmacist, whatever it may be, any manufacturing pharmaceutical company who makes them, are considered covered persons. And if you're harmed by what they do, as long as they do what the secretary has deemed to be covered, you can't sue them. And so that's a catastrophe. That is just absolutely a violation of a number of aspects of the Constitution, where separation of powers between the legislative body. It says in the law, the PrEP Act, that no court has subject matter jurisdiction over any determination or declaration made by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And when I read that many, many years ago, my jaw just fell open. I'm like, that's how you define legalized tyranny. And quite frankly, legalized democide. And that's one of my latest articles. It makes it so that the government, and they're the first on the list for being covered and you can't sue them, the United States, right? They can do anything. Now, they can't mandate it. So I'm not talking about that. And it's not about money. That's the CARES Act that gave hospitals incentives and money. But it essentially says, so long as the secretary says these people are covered if they use these covered countermeasures, if you get harmed, sorry, you can't sue them. You can apply make a claim to the compensation program. But in all of COVID, as of June 1st, because they haven't put out the information for July, only 39 claims have been awarded, and the vast majority of those are just for a couple of $1,000s, which is, pales compared to the harms that have been caused. It's a corrupt racket to protect industry and allow them to not worry about the quality of their product. And as we speak today, yesterday, RFK literally in writing and in video said, oh, the mRNA injections did not work. And quite frankly, they cannot work if you understand anatomy. And the risks outweigh the benefits, which means they cause more harm than good, but they didn't take them off the market. And so anybody who gets a jab should now listen to RFK's words, which have been manipulated in the media, and people think this is a good thing. This is a horrible thing. They know that the jabs don't work. They know that they cause harm, but yet they're still on the market. This is government colluding with industry, protecting them from lawsuit so that people who fall victim to this, program to protect you from a disease that is very, very questionable, you can't sue if you're harmed. And I don't know, that's a 10 or 15 minute summary. Where do you want to go from here? Because,
Yeah,
every
I
time
know
I look at
exactly. Yeah.
every time I look at the PrEP Act, I see something else. I'm like, oh my God, it's even worse than I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was a great summary. And I actually failed to mention this is a special event, you could say, because today is, or this episode, I should say, when this Friday will be the 2-year anniversary of the Bassline. So 2 years strong, the 104th episode. And I think this is a perfect episode to be a commemorative episode because it's a call to action. And we're going to lay out some more groundwork here, but we're definitely going to get into making information available in terms of how the listeners can get involved and how we can all start participating in and contributing to this campaign. My next question for you, James, is the PrEP Act and how that played a role in the COVID event. And I heard, this term, which I'd never heard prior, of an EUA. That was what was being applied during COVID, the emergency use authorization, which seems like a PrEP Act type of thing. Do you know, or could you explain somewhat how the PrEP Act applied to COVID and how it may have interfaced with the EUA?
This is going to get complicated, and I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. People who want
Okay.
to know more about it can certainly reach out to me and break it all down. But as far as the PrEP Act is concerned, any product that the Secretary of Health and Human Services refers to in his declaration, whether it's an FDA approved product, which is one process, an emergency use authorized product, which is another process, or the language, if you dig down into the rabbit hole, it literally says, and I'm going to paraphrase it, so maybe not literally, but it basically says, if if the Secretary of Health and Human Services believes or determines that a product might be approved in a span of the next 8 years, then it can be a covered countermeasure. So it could be a completely and totally experimental, whatever the heck it is he says can be used. The emergency use authorization process is defined in previous legislation. They kind of work hand in hand. But with emergency use authorization, they don't have to do clinical trials. They don't have to approve it. They don't have to prove it's safe or effective. The end result of it is it's an emergency. We're authorizing its use. And all they're legally really allowed to say is we think it might help. It might be effective. We don't know what the adverse events might be. And so one of the problems that happened with COVID, and I'll just come right out and say it, they lied. The products that were authorized for emergency use, if anybody was talking about any of those products and said they were safe and effective, they lied. But the PrEP Act covers not just manufacturers and doctors and hospitals and clinics and pharmacies and all that sort of stuff. It also covers anyone who is promoting the product. So hold on a minute. You're promoting the product, you're lying about it, and that caused someone to believe you and took something that harmed them. They can't sue anybody who promoted the product. Now, I want to digress just a little tiny bit and make sure people understand that what I'm talking about and what the PrEP Act is focused on are civil lawsuits. A person who would, say that they were harmed by something and wanted to file for damages for the loss that they suffered, loss of life, loss of health, disability, hospitalization, time off from work, loss of a loved one, whatever it may be. The PrEP Act deals with civil lawsuits. If a crime was committed, if somebody, committed a crime and you can identify the law that was broken and, it's in Title 18, some type of criminal act that was caused, those are not covered by the PrEP Act, but you can't, you can raise a complaint with the prosecuting attorney, a district attorney, attorney general, but you hit this stone wall of, well, are they going to impanel a grand jury? Are they going to bring an indictment? Are they going to wage war against big pharma and the government and all that sort of thing? So we're not talking about criminal actions. We're talking about civil complaints for people that have been harmed because of hospital protocols, ventilators, remdesivir, and the jabs, obviously, but drugs. And even it covers treatments to treat the adverse events of the damage done by the treatment that you started with. So, I mean, they've got everything covered, top to bottom in the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex. If you were harmed and it was diagnosed as COVID, you're out of luck. Now, I also want to make sure everybody understands that the COVID declaration and the 12 amendments that were declared by various Health and Human Services secretaries to amend that original declaration are just one of 9 diseases for which a PrEP Act declaration exists. I don't know if I can remember all of them off the top of my head, but there's anthrax and acute radiation syndrome and botulinum, of all things, and pneumonia and Zika and Marburg and smallpox and monkeypox and so forth and so on. The PrEP Act is not just COVID, and it's not just the vaccine. It's far more wide-ranging than most people are aware of.
So, I guess you've covered some of what I'm going to ask you about next, but I think it's okay in this case to be a little bit redundant. I guess that's what they call sufficient redundancy in
Mhm.
literature. But if you were to sort of break this down for people into bullet points, and you had limited time to explain to someone what's so bad about the PrEP Act, what are sort of the bullet points? What do we, the concerned citizen, want to impart on our fellow citizens when we're explaining in a limited amount of time what makes the PrEP Act so bad from our standpoint, from this point of view of a citizen?
The super short time, shortened version of this, the soundbite, is it's licensed to kill. It's licensed to harm. It's licensed to devastate people in a hospital setting, in a medical setting. They can do whatever the secretary says, and if you're harmed by it, sorry, you're out of luck. Okay. Now, I'll tell the same story in a different way, and I want to give credit to Aaron Siri because I first heard him tell this story, and I'll try to do it justice. He was doing an interview with Tucker Carlson, and it's in the video that you can watch at the top of repealtheprepact.com, and I encourage people to do that. Go to repealtheprepact.com, and by all means, watch the videos and listen to the audios and read all the information. But he said, hey, Tucker, let me tell you, I got a business opportunity for you. It's really great. You might want to participate. Okay. We've got this high-tech company and we make these products that, quite frankly, they're toxic. But, not too many companies can manufacture them. We've got patents and, the technology is advanced enough that not too many companies can do it. But it gets better because the government is going to buy up all the products from us and give them away to people for free. And it gets better than that because they have this law that the PrEP Act, if anybody gets harmed, the government is going to step in the way kind of as the main insurance against harm. And so nobody's going to be able to sue us for the harm that our products cause. And it gets better than that though, because they're going to promote it and in many ways coerce and attempt to mandate that people get the product that the government's going to buy from us. And they're going to also enlist 50 different health agencies from the 50 different countries, as well as the media from all around the country and all around the world. They're going to lie and they're going to say that it's safe and effective and get everybody to believe that it's going to help prevent a problem that maybe doesn't even really exist. And we just get to take the money and go to the bank as long as we keep our mouth shut and don't really talk about what we've learned in the trials that these products don't necessarily even work. Would you like to invest in our company? Does that sound like a good business proposition? Okay. Now, if this was some other industry, if this was, the auto industry, hey, we're going to make a real clunker and, it's going to have all kinds of problems and people might die in an accident, but the government's going to pay for all of that and the media is going to lie to you about it. Um, if you have an ethical bone in your body, you would be like, oh my God, I got to report you to somebody. Oh, wait a minute. I can't report you to anybody because the people that I would report you to are in on the deal. That's what we're dealing with here. The laws have been corrupted to make unethical, immoral behavior legal. And you can't sue if you're harmed by that type of activity. And that type of collusion between government and industry, Benito Mussolini talked about that as corporatism or fascism. And this is what we're dealing with. The regulatory agencies have been more than captured. They're more than happy to promote horrible, deadly products from companies. For what means, for what purpose? I think it's actually legalized democide. That may be a new word for some people. Genocide and homicide and fratricide and suicide. Democide is when your government is trying to kill you. And while that's, really hard to want to believe, when you listen to what RFK just said, he just said, we know the products don't work. We know they cause more harm than benefit. and he didn't take them off the market. They're still available. And what they agreed to do is move forward with a couple of companies called Arcturus and Amplitude. And those studies are going into not modified RNA, but self-amplifying RNA and trans-amplifying RNA, which I'm sure is a new term for a lot of people. What in the world is coming in the future? Well, yeah, maybe they knocked away some trials because they've got more treacherous and confusing and high-tech things coming in the future that most people don't know about. This was not a victory. This was insanity. And so, if you want to see some self-amplifying and trans-amplifying mRNA jabs in your future, go look up Arcturus and Amplitude, and you'll see what good old BARDA has in store for you in the future.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you mentioned those things because I would love to direct people to my Substack. I just published a new article a few days ago. I would love for you guys to please check that out. But also my previous article called Scratching the Surface, I cover Arcturus and I covered BARDA. So if those are things you're not familiar with, I think my previous article will give you a good intro, at least, to those important players in the game. But then also, I want to direct all my listeners to certainly subscribe to James's Substack. He is outstanding on Substack, and he's prolific, he's profound, and you will not be disappointed if you subscribe to James's Substack. So please look up James Roguski, Roguski, and yes, certainly subscribe to that Substack. It's an important one. And yeah, we're really in a new era of information. We need to start at least embracing that one positive aspect of what's going on, which is that we can curate our own information in a way that we never have before. We don't need to sit back and watch what people have called legacy media, or what I just call the corporate media. I don't like to say mainstream media. I try to really avoid that because I feel like that's sort of a hijacking of language to agree with them that they are mainstream. I don't think they're mainstream. I think, as my guest and friend, Professor Mark Crispin Miller, said, that they're very much outside of the mainstream in terms of a normal thought process in most cases, but they sort of, through this forced application, turn really bizarre and bad ideas into so-called mainstream ideas in an artificial sort of way. But definitely, everyone, please check out James Roguski's Substack. Please check out my Substack. And I want to now get into the question of how we participate, how we join the struggle. I guess tell us about repealtheprepact.com, repealtheprepact.org. Maybe you could mention particular Substack articles you published that people could refer to really start getting versed in this subject. But I just want to say to everyone that before we get into this next really important segment of the conversation in terms of how we become proactive, I want to say, we live in this just difficult world with so many challenges, so many problems. It's very overwhelming as we try to take care of our families, as we try to, God forbid, enjoy our lives to some extent. And it's very hard to figure out what to do sometimes. It's a question you hear all the time. What are we supposed to do? How do we take on these monstrous forces? And, it's not easy. There are no magic answers, I would say, but I think we need to take stock when we can put clear goals in front of ourselves, when we have things that we can mobilize around. And I think James is really onto something with this PrEP Act thing, because it's something that, anybody in the world would agree that these policies, these, this legislative document, it's not to the benefit of the public. It's detrimental. It favors the corporation. It favors the powerful over the common citizen. And it's so problematic for the reasons that James has described so well here today, that I just want to basically point out to everyone that we have a great opportunity to unify around something that's so clear to see, right? It really shouldn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, if you believe in all that stuff. I mean, I was joking on the X space where you appeared the other day, James, that a jihadist would agree the PrEP Act is a bad idea. I mean, whatever your political designation, you have to agree the PrEP Act is just a terrible thing. Corporations should not be granted legal impunity really under any circumstances. And the fact of it being an emergency, I think it's the opposite. I don't think that our rights should be relinquished. I think our rights are specifically for emergencies. That when an emergency happens, no, we still have our rights. But if you can start saying, oh, it's an emergency, I mean, aside from the fact that you're clearly incentivizing the creating of emergencies, that should never be the grounds for overturning our constitutional rights, our basic human rights. So, James, give us an intro to repealtheprepact.com, repealtheprepact.org, and some of the resources that are available for people who are ready to start getting involved with this.
As you may have remembered from our first interview that we did, I'm going to give you an outside the box answer to your seemingly obvious question. Okay. If there was a new movie in the theaters right now, and I had seen the movie and I wanted to talk to you about the movie, and I said, hey, Jeremiah, what'd you think about such and such a movie? And you said, oh, I haven't seen it. I really should shut my mouth. I really should say, oh, okay. Well, man, I think it's worth seeing. I'd love to talk to you about it, but I don't want to spoil the plot. When you've seen the movie, let's talk about it. Okay. If it was a book club and, we were all supposed to read the same book and we're talking about the book, but you hadn't read the book. Hey, spoiler alert, don't tell me what's going on here. So I hesitate to talk about the PrEP Act because there's an experience that people will benefit from if they find out for themselves what the PrEP Act actually says, and they have the type of eureka moment that I experienced, where I think I already, let one of the spoilers out of the bag. I was like, there's a section in there that says the secretary, whatever he declares, just because he wants to declare it, he can do so. And no court in the country, no federal court, no state court, will have subject matter jurisdiction over any declaration made by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Several years ago, when I read that, I was like, you got to be kidding me. That's tyranny. One branch of government is cutting another branch of government completely out of the thing and putting all power into one unelected official. That's insane. Okay. And for the longest time, I was just sitting there with my jaw hanging open going, this can't possibly be. This is wrong on every single level. Okay. That's just one issue, right? When you look at other aspects of it, it completely preempts all state laws. Well, I don't know. I think we're just doing audio, right? So I don't know that people can see me right now.
Yeah, just
but
audio.
I'm holding up my little pocket Constitution that I have on my desk, and you open up to the 9th and 10th Amendment. I hope people know, off the top of their head a little bit about the 9th and 10th Amendment. It's like, unless Congress was, or the federal government was given any authority specifically enumerated in the Constitution, it all goes to the states or to the people. Well, this law says, oh no, it all comes back to the federal government. And it's essentially, if they wanted to do this, they maybe could have done it with a constitutional amendment, but you can't change the Constitution with a law and say, no, wipe out all of state law and you got to do what we say. So, anybody who is, a proponent of states' rights should be absolutely appalled. The 7th Amendment, for those who are not up on it, says you have a right to a trial by jury. You got to go all the way back to 1787 for anything over $20. right? So I don't know what inflation, maybe that's $2,000 now, but still, you have a right to a trial by jury. Well, not according to the PrEP Act, throw that to the curb, right? You can't sue anybody. You've got a right to due process. Well, in their compensation plan, you submit your information, you don't get any feedback, you don't get any say. It's, what they say goes. And if they make a determination based on whatever they want to make a determination on, you either, get a reward, filed for your claim where you get some kind of compensation or not. There's no due process there. Everything is wiped out. And so it violates the Constitution. It violates the First, Fifth, Seventh, Ninth, and 10th Amendments. Don't take my word for it. Go to repealtheprepact.com, watch the videos. I have a one-page summary. I have a 4-page, it looks like a little newspaper. I think I've made it easy to read. You can read what's in there. But still, don't believe me. Don't believe my summary. The PrEP Act was only 14 pages long. And I have a PDF on the page that I highlighted the points that I'm talking about. When you read it for yourself, it should trigger this eureka, oh my God, holy crap, red pill moment where you go, no wonder they wanted to get a COVID diagnosis at all costs, because once they were under that diagnosis, they could do these things that, due to other legislation, made them a ton of money. But no matter what happened, they couldn't be sued. And it explains an awful lot of why hospitals did what they did, and why the way COVID was handled. Because if somebody told you, look, if you're thinking for yourself and you're doing stuff that works, but it's outside of what we tell you to do, you can be sued, and we're going to come for your license. We're going to come for you. You're going to get fired. You're going to get kicked out. But if you just do what we tell you to do, that the secretary has covered, you're good to go. Even the most ethical doctor would have a hard time pushing back against that powerful of a system. Now, many doctors did, and they lost their licenses. They got booted. They had horrors come upon their lives because they stood for what was right. Most of the people who were still left in the medical establishment just shut up and went along with the program. And you can't sue them. And they're still in those jobs doing that same sort of thing still to this day with COVID and 8 other ailments. And so I encourage people to, step number 1 always is to get clear on the facts. Okay? You don't have to go as deep down the rabbit hole as I've gone. I've dug down as deep as I can go and tried to summarize it in video and audio and written form so that you can have a much faster learning curve and get up to speed really quickly. But get clear on how freaking horrible the PrEP Act is. Okay? Step number 2 is to raise awareness. And what I encourage people to do, I was talking about the movie and the television and all that sort, or book club or whatever. Don't vomit all of this up all over everybody. Okay? Ask them a question. Hey, what's your opinion of the PrEP Act? I still believe at this point in time, 99.99999% of Americans, if they're honest, they'll go, I have no idea. What are you talking about? What's the PrEP Act? Okay. Well, you can make the mistake of trying to explain it to them. What I suggest you do is say, hey, we don't got time to get into that. It's going to take a while. If you're interested, what's your email or your phone number? I'll send you a text message or an email, and send them to repealtheprepact.com, and let the videos and the audios and the information do the work for you. Okay. I can't do as good a job on this interview as the website does that's all been edited and put together. Okay. If you want to keep it really simple, by all means, take this video or audio recording and share it with anybody if you wish. It's going to get listed, on Repeal the PrEP Act as soon as it's available. Don't try to be the person who has to explain it. Just trigger people's curiosity. Now, maybe 9 out of 10 people you talk to are not going to care. Don't waste your time. Okay. For the person who says, well, I'm curious, what is it? Tell me. It's like, no, you go look at all the information, go watch the movie, go read the book. And then after you have had that experience, then we can have a conversation. It's not worth having that conversation now because you have no idea what we're going to be talking about. And they won't believe you anyways because it's off the charts ridiculous. Once you've identified people who are willing to take the time to learn something, and then maybe they have some questions. I'm always available. People can reach out to me. But if they come back to you and they go, oh my God, I had no idea. Now you've done the most important thing, I think, in activism, which is you've identified an ally. Don't waste your time trying to convince people. Spend your time triggering curiosity, sharing accurate information with people who are interested, identifying your allies, and then when you have somebody who's like, oh my God, this is horrible, we got to do something about this. Now you've identified an ally, you're starting to organize. Okay. And so one of the things that people can do is sign a petition. You mentioned repealtheprepact.com. That's where all the information is. You can go to repealtheprepact.org to sign the petition. Now I'm going to say something that's going to probably surprise you. You might have heard me say it before, but it's going to surprise the listeners as well. Petitions are bull. I won't swear on your program. They're BS. Okay. The purpose of this petition is to identify people who want to repeal the PrEP Act and can identify the state and the congressional district in which they reside so that we can organize appropriately by state and congressional district, because the job at hand is to convince senators, 2 senators from each state and 1 congressperson from the district in which you reside, that they should co-sponsor legislation, H.R. 4388, to repeal the PrEP Act. It would take your senator or your congressperson about a minute to tell, well, let me start with congresspeople. All they have to do is tell their legislative assistant staff member, hey, I've decided to co-sponsor H.R. 4388 to repeal the PrEP Act. Go do what you got to do and put my name on the list on the congressional website. Might take the staff member a few minutes to do the appropriate things that they need to do to make that happen, but it wouldn't take the congressperson more than a minute to give the instruction to do that. If your congressperson cannot do that, you got to ask yourself a couple of questions. Number 1, why? Well, maybe he doesn't know anything about it. Okay, that's fair. Share the information with them. There's all kinds of information on repealtheprepact.com that you could share, not the least of which are all of the Democrats who were telling everybody back 20 years ago how unconstitutional this thing was. So it's not Republican or Democrat, the way you said earlier. It's not a bipartisan thing. If your congressperson will not take a minute to direct his staff to sign on as a co-sponsor, you got to investigate how much money he's getting from Big Pharma. And you got to investigate who might be running in the midterm elections against that congressperson, because if they're not listening to you, if they're willing to support the status quo of the PrEP Act after millions of people have been harmed, they need to go. And they need to know that you want them out for that reason alone, because, who are they listening to? Are they getting all kinds of donations from Big Pharma? Are they faced with lobbyists, that are telling them what to do? Or is their party hierarchy, demanding that they don't touch this? And so there's a lot of work to be done. I started this, published repealtheprepact.com on purpose on May 3rd of this year, because that was 18 months prior to the midterm elections on November 3rd, 2026. We're already into August, so there's 14 months and change remaining until the next election. We have time to have people reach out to their members of Congress and senators to get support for this legislation. But step number one is to get regular people to be more aware, because it always takes people who are adamant about change to push for that change. And at the moment, I'm going to say over 99.999% of Americans have no idea what harm happened over the last 5.5 or so years, and off into the future, if we don't change this, can directly be attributed to the PrEP Act.
Thanks a lot for that, James. And yeah, I think that people should really seize the opportunity here to cross certain boundaries. I think this might give us a good opportunity. I think there might be people who politically disagree with you under normal circumstances, and you can go and reach out to them and say, hey, you know what? There's one thing I think we might actually agree on.
Exactly.
That's one way you can start a conversation. I also would recommend, and again, we don't want to just spam people. We don't want to alienate people, but repealtheprepact.com and repealtheprepact.org. Both of those websites are pretty straightforward enough that that's something you can sprinkle around. I mean, I would love for people to actually go to both of those websites to, one, get educated about the situation, and two, sign the petition. But an initial goal is just to get that sort of, and I hate to, participate in this game of sloganeering that's so popular in America at this point, but Americans love their slogans. Repeal the PrEP Act. We have to get that into circulation. So anyone who's listening to this, take that website, text it to some people, send it on WhatsApp, post it on your Facebook. You don't have to put a big explanation to go along with it. You could put a little explanation if you want, but even just putting repealtheprepact.com out there, just sprinkle it out there. I don't think
Yeah,
people will resent you.
hashtag repeal the PrEP Act.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
There
People
are
won't resent you for it.
There are many graphics that you can use. Anyone who has graphic talent, by all means, if you've got some ideas, make it happen. I realize we're just audio here, but there's a visual, and it also can be spoken, and I think it makes the point very clear. If you understand what the PrEP Act has permitted, whether you want to call it medical murder or hospital homicide or whatever, people have died, and there's no accountability. And so most people have heard of MAGA, right? Make America Great Again. I think the pharmaceutical lobby's interpretation of MAGA is make Americans go away, because it seems to be what they're really good at. But you've also heard of MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. Well, what I'm promoting, and I realize that your listeners won't be able to see it, but I think you will be able to, the way we're recording this, you can see me, is, what we need to do is MACA, which is make murder a crime again. And by repealing the PrEP Act, if you bring back accountability from a civil lawsuit perspective, most of these products will immediately come off the market, because all of the lawyers and accountants and bean counters at any of these companies are relying on the fact that they can't be sued for the harms that their harmful products cause. You take away that liability protection. If you're a mathematician, it's really easy. You change the equation. You add in a whole big variable, right? You have a big minus sign of profit minus, insurance costs to protect us, have some kind of liability protection that the government has been providing for free. The government has been behaving like a liability insurance company, giving a free policy to all of the companies and doctors and hospitals and everybody else, if they had to pay for liability insurance for the harms that they cause. They'll stop doing this in a heartbeat, not because it's the right thing to do, but because their lawyers and their accountants will go, hey, you got to stop doing that. We're going to get creamed with, one or two lawsuits take you right out of the game. This would stop immediately. And, that's what I'm working to make happen.
Yeah, and we are nearing the end of the program here, but I did want to ask you, out of just interest and curiosity, honestly, James, is what makes you tick? Why are you so dedicated? Why are you so motivated in what you do? You seem just you're a true soldier for the cause. And where does that come from?
Um, Probably half my life ago. I'm 65, and 30 or so years ago, I went down the rabbit hole and went into looking at natural health, and got to learn many of the things that a lot of people are just now beginning to learn about how the medical establishment was corrupted. And I learned about natural health and learned things that people would, think are unfathomable, just unbelievable. I mean, Star Trek style treatments that, have existed for decades and I've benefited from, that make you look at what your doctors or your dentists or your oncologists do, and you just realize they don't have a clue, because there are things that exist in the world today that are being kept under wraps. And so my purpose is to expose just, not just the harms that they're causing, but to get people to understand that there are methodologies, that people can pursue to maintain, optimize, and regain your health. And so when COVID hit, it was just like, oh, here we go again. It's just, amped up beyond belief. But when I saw what the jabs did, I was like, oh, this is just what they always do. The the testing and the drugs and the injections do not improve your health. I view those as customer acquisition tools. If you can take a healthy person and get them to take a test, which is fraudulent, but get them to believe it because you're a good con artist, and you take healthy people and believe that they've got to swallow or inject poisons to regain or protect their health from some future, unknown, you're actually creating new customers, because the tests and the drugs and the jabs, and most importantly, the diagnosis. I'm opposed to the diagnostic process because it's a hypnotic suggestion that makes people believe the only thing they can do to maintain their health is to swallow poison. And so, it's my purpose in life to raise people's awareness of how they're being scammed by an industry that pretends to want to help you. And many good people in that industry do honestly believe their own propaganda, but they're working in a system that is designed to profit from other people's dis-ease. You just got to ask yourself a simple question. When you're healthy, who profits? And when you look at the medical establishment, you realize that the sicker you are and the more they can convince you that you need this, that, or the other treatment, the more money leaves your pocket or your insurance company's pocket and goes to them. And so the incentives are just totally messed up. And, it's just what I've been doing for past almost 30 years, and wake up in the morning and do it all over again. It's just, different. If you haven't heard me do it before, you get to hear me do it now. It's just where I am in my life. And I think it's the most important battle that we can face.
Thank you so much, James. It's been an honor to have you on again. And I think this was very fitting for a 2-year anniversary episode, because we have a call to action for everyone. And that is, we want to repeal the PrEP Act. It has been so important in executing these abuses of our rights over, especially the past 5.5 years, but in general, since its inception, it's been harmful, I would say. And we don't want this kind of legislation. I think it might also start a positive domino effect. If we get this stuff out of the way, if we tackle this one, I think we'll have a lot of wind beneath our wings at that time, and a lot of other good things can happen. So, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for supporting this program over the past 2 years. Thanks to James for being our special guest today. Please go to jeremiahhosea.com. Check out my music over there. RemoteLearningChess.com. Schedule a chess lesson. Go to Substack. Please subscribe to my Substack if you haven't already. Please subscribe to James Roguski Substack, repealtheprepact.com, repealtheprepact.org. Let's spread the word about this. And yeah, not to chastise you guys. I know everyone has a lot on their plate, but please don't listen to a program like this and say, "Oh, I have some little interesting information for myself." This is meant to be propagated. We really need folks who understand the seriousness of what we're discussing to just take some time. Honestly, if you just sit down even for 5 minutes and say, "I'm going to just take 5 minutes to try to do my part," you could actually do a whole heck of a lot in terms of making 5 minutes of seriously good effort towards making people aware of this serious issue that is totally underaddressed, but as we said, completely transcending party lines and all that kind of divisive stuff. So thanks again, James. Have a great weekend. Hope to talk to you soon. Keep up the great work, and repeal the PrEP Act. Let's go.
Thank you very much.
With open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love. Yes, it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did long. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did love's the highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend. Love's the deepest truth. Nothing could be deeper than love, my friend. When you stop and you take the time just to think about your life, you'll recall the ones you love and the ones who were always there for you. Better thank those friends better. You better make amends. Go and tell them now, yeah. Tell them what they mean to you. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Doop doo doop doo. Dib on baby did love. Doop doo doop doo.